Should ICE be required to wear body cameras during enforcement operations? That's what we're going to talk about today. I already had this planned, and then lo and behold, Tom Homan was on CNN. Today's Sunday, the 26th of July. Tom Homan, who is the White House border czar, was on CNN's State of the Union being interviewed by Dana Bash. And he says he's all in favor of body cameras. He wants everybody to be able to see what the officer sees. He thinks it's better for ICE if they wear body cameras. Well, we're going to get into that in a minute because, Congress has given DHS, particularly ICE, lots and lots of money. Most ICE officers have body cameras, but they don't use them as cameras. They use them as radio mics, and there's a reason for that. So we're going to talk about that too. And basically, I just want to present both sides of the story. As you can imagine, I think they should have to wear body cameras, but I'm going to try and keep my opinions out of it, which, if you watch my channel at all, you know that's probably not going to happen, but I'm going to try. I'm going to make an effort. And we're going to talk about whether they should or should not have to be required to wear body cameras. First of all, I think you need to understand, because everybody thinks of ICE as these people that come out to deport other people. They're, whether you call them, law enforcement who are really putting their lives on the line, or you just call them goons that jump out of black SUVs with masks on. The SUVs don't have any identification on them. The vehicles don't have any identification. I'm going to do a whole separate Cory Booker, just to give you a spoiler alert. Spoiler alert. Cory Booker had proposed something back in January of 2026. This is not new that some Congress people want to hold ICE accountable. But I think it's important for you to understand, as you know, when it comes to immigration, everything's under the Department of Homeland Security. You've got USCIS, which is supposedly the service arm. They're the ones that grant permanent residence, naturalizations, approve or disapprove asylum. That's supposed to be for service. Then you have CBP, which is the Border Patrol. They're on the borders. And they're also the ones that greet you at the airport and ask to see your passport. And then there's ICE. But ICE has two divisions to it. One is the one that you're thinking about when you say ICE. They're arresting non-citizens who are deportable, or they think are deportable, or people who already have final orders of deportation. They're exactly who you think ICE is. But there's a whole different department of ICE called HSI. It stands for Homeland Security Investigations. And they do other things. They investigate human trafficking and the drug cartels, international criminal organizations, child abuse, or I should say child exploitation. What else do they have? Money laundering. They investigate intellectual property theft. So they do a whole bunch of other stuff. So I would urge my fellow liberals, cool it with the whole abolish ICE bullshit. Okay, I hated it when they were talking about defunding the police, because who came up with that expression? It's ridiculous. And then their defense is, well, it doesn't really mean that. It means, have them move the money around. It's like, no, it means defund the police. You mean what you say and if you don't, then you should change how you say it. It's the same thing with abolish ICE. Okay, we can't or in my opinion, we shouldn't abolish ICE. We have a real need to have human trafficking and money laundering and all these terrible things investigated. We need some agency to do that. Well, HSI does that. Another thing for ICE, which I remember when they first came under ICE, the trial attorneys, you know, when you go to court, you go to immigration court, you've got the judge who is under the Department of Justice. Okay? That's not the Department of Homeland Security. The judge is Department of Justice. And then you have your attorney, who is independent, and then you have the trial attorney, which is the government's attorney. Well, those trial attorneys actually work for ICE. And I remember I had a number of friends that worked there, at least colleagues. Some of them were friends, but most of them were just colleagues. And they just hated it. They hated being known that they worked for ICE. And to this day, if you ask, well, who's your department that you work under, they'll tell you, I work under DHS. They won't say I work under ICE, but they do. Anyway, so there's a whole lot more to ICE than just I call them the goons. You know, the guys that are jumping out of these unmarked vehicles with masks on and, you know, shooting people. Just saying. So that's first that you should understand that. And the part of ICE that we're talking about, which is that whole enforcement end of it, it's commonly called ERO. You might hear other immigration attorneys, Jim Hacking and people like that, talk about ERO. And that's the part of ICE that they're talking about. That stands for Enforcement and Removal Operations, okay? So you have, under ICE, you've got HSI and you've got ERO. They do different things. Now, let's take a minute to talk about why this issue this issue is now suddenly, you know, in the spotlight, right? Like today on CNN, right? It's not a new debate. You know, immigration attorneys, organizations that represent immigrants like nonprofits, the ACLU and the American Immigration Lawyers Association, and lots of people have been calling for transparency for years and years. But, of course, what's really pushed this into the spotlight are those two deaths, right? The guy down in Texas and Houston, who'd been here for like 35 years, had no criminal record whatsoever, was the father of 3 U.S. citizen children, and he got fatally shot and killed in Houston. And don't you love it? I just have to add this. I don't know if you missed this or not, but I have to add this. About a week or two after he gets shot and killed, I'm going to say DHS. I'm not sure who particularly came out and made this big announcement, but made this announcement that they had found drugs in this man's car. They don't know what kind of drugs right now. They've sent it off to be analyzed, and as soon as they get the toxicology report back, they'll let you know. But, you know, don't think this guy is such a good guy, because we found lots of packets in his car, in his vehicle. Well, they got the toxicology report back. Take a wild stab what the drugs were. I swear to God, I couldn't make this up. They were packets of salt. Salt. It's like, what? Now, I don't know, you might have heard the thing about the drugs being found, but did you hear that it was actually just salt? Oh my God. You know, this is another one of the problems. This is why we call for transparency, because these sons of bitches, I'm going to be nice, these sons of bitches, they lie. They stand up and just deflect, and they lie about this and they lie about that, and there's nobody else with eyes on this. One of the big reasons is because nobody's wearing body cameras, right? Nobody's wearing body cameras. Plus, DHS won't let other, as we saw this up, I think it was up in Minnesota, they had a big problem, and I think in LA too, that DHS says we're doing our own investigation. Well, come on, people. We know how that goes, right? We know every time there's a cop who does something wrong, and internal affairs are going to take care of it. And then guess what? Internal affairs decides, oh, well, there's really nothing wrong here. He did exactly what he was trained to do. This is perfect. And that's what's happening with ICE. You know, if you're going to be, the only people who are going to be investigating bad things that you're doing are you and yours. Guess what? You're going to be found blameless, which is what's happening. So that's one of the big reasons that people are saying there's really no excuse for them not to have body cameras. Now, I want to talk about that a second because, as I said, most ICE officers have body cameras, but they don't use them as cameras. Of course, they have their reasoning for this. They have their excuse. You ready? And stick around for that very last line that I'm going to talk in this little section because it's just so perfect. I did some research about the whole body camera debate, and I found something interesting that's on the, what's it called? The Intercept? Yeah, the Intercept. And according to their website, it says, The Intercept is an award-winning nonprofit news organization dedicated to holding the powerful accountable through fearless adversarial journalism. Okay, so according to their very recent article, they said, quote, federal officers at the scene of the killing of Johann Sebastian Joran Guerrero by ICE in Maine were wearing body cameras, according to 4 ICE officials who reviewed the images from the scene. But the cameras are on multi-function devices that ICE officers use as radio mics. The Trump administration has claimed that officers involved in the shooting were not wearing body cameras. Okay? So, quote, although the device worn by the ICE officers are designated to work as body cameras, the ICE official who spoke to the Intercept on the condition of anonymity, of course, said the function isn't used because they are contractually obligated to use Axon, a law enforcement tech firm. They have multiple functionalities, one ICE official who identified the body camera at the scene in Maine told the Intercept. However, we are currently only using them as mics because of the Axon contract. And this is the part that I said this is priceless. The Department of Homeland Security, ICE's parent agency, purchased body-worn cameras through a contract with Axon, which is AXON, right? A law enforcement tech firm. I already said that. President Donald Trump, you ready? This should come as no big surprise. President Donald Trump has purchased as much as $5 million in shares from Axon. Why does that not surprise me? All right. Whenever a police shooting happens, we all know this, right? As soon as somebody, a cop shoots somebody, one of the first questions that reporters asks is there any body camera footage, right? And basically, people have become used to the idea that there's going to be body camera evidence, some kind of video showing this, right? When no recording exists, then doubts and disagreements can linger for months, for years. One side says, well, everybody knows this happened, and the other side says, there's no proof of that. And so this constantly becomes a conflict for people. We can't see with our own eyes what the heck was going on because there's no video evidence, which in my ever so humble opinion is precisely why DHS doesn't want them to wear body cameras. But as you're going to see, there's a lot of officials that are pro body camera. They think it's good for the law enforcement. We could talk about that in 2 seconds. And one other thing to keep in mind, this is not necessarily just about immigration. It's also about government accountability, civil rights officers' safety. It's about public confidence. Because really, I think there's a lot of people, especially on the liberal side, that we don't believe a damn thing that's coming out of the mouths of any official from the Trump administration because they lie all the time. You know, they lie constantly. I mean, Trump just did this thing. They decided immigration. No, strike that. ICE said that they were going to put a pause, a temporary pause on traffic stops because this is becoming a problem. And within 24 hours, Trump has removed that. He says, no, we're fine. We're fine. Homan, I think I mentioned this before, but Tom Homan was on CNN today on the 26th of July. He was on CNN talking to Dana Bash. And we're going to talk about that, about what he said about that pause, that temporary pause. He thought it was okay. Basically, the spoiler alert, he said it was okay because changes have already been made. And she says, in 24 hours? And he says, yeah. And she says, well, like what? And what he said was that, see, I'm getting ahead of my script here, but what he said was, it's already been decided that when there's a traffic stop, at least one of the officers has to have a body camera on and recording. One? Why not everybody? One, you're going to get one perspective. And if that particular officer decides to turn away at a crucial time, then you have nothing. So why doesn't every single ICE officer have his body camera on and functioning? So we're not necessarily talking just about immigration. We're talking about state troopers, the FBI, the DEA, any kind of law enforcement, U.S. Marshal Services. How do we give officers the tools that they need to do their job safely, but at the same time give the public confidence that law enforcement actions are conducted fairly and professionally? Finding that balance has never been easy. You might actually remember this. I'm going to give a couple of, like a 1-2 minute spiel about body cameras and how they changed policing. I remember when that came out. Of course, I didn't look it up, so I don't know the year when that started happening. But it's not been that long ago. And I remember when they said that people, all the cops were going to have to wear body cameras, which they still don't across the country, especially in smaller places, smaller precincts and stuff. They might not have the budget for it. ICE cannot claim they don't have the budget for it. They've got a huge budget. But anyway, I remember when that first happened, and I thought, that's never going to work. They're just not going to turn them on. They're not going to turn them on. And I found out later, well, at the same time, I heard somebody say, it's not that they're not going to turn them on. They're going to forget that they have them on. And I found out later that, if you're supposed to be wearing body cameras and they're supposed to be on anytime you stop somebody, like a cop pulls over somebody, he's supposed to turn on his camera, probably before he gets out of the car. But he's supposed to have that camera on, and there's consequences if you don't. At least you get a talking to. Big consequences, but they're held accountable, and they have to wear these body cameras, and they have to be on. But you know what? What that woman said, where the cops are going to forget that they even have them on, proved to be true. I've mentioned multiple times in this channel that I watch John Bryan, he's the civil rights lawyer out of West Virginia, and he has lots and lots of videos of cops doing the wrong thing. And why do we have those things? Because they have video evidence from the body cameras, right? And there's other ones, lackluster, and if you know other ones that you watch, put them in the comments. I'd be interested if there's somebody that you particularly like that that talks about police misbehaving. So it wasn't that long ago that body cameras came along, right? And I remember thinking to myself, how the heck did the police solve any of these problems before there were cameras all over the place? Because you're not just talking about body cameras, you're talking about cameras that different stores have up. Now everybody's got ring phone cameras. People walking down the street, they have their phones that have their cameras. How did they solve any of these problems and get convictions for people? Well, there were witnesses. Witnesses can remember things differently. You have two very honest people who completely believe what they're saying. She saw this and he saw that. It was exactly the same thing they were looking at, but they saw different things. So anyway, you'd have the witnesses would have their statements. The officer reports were very important to get at least charges brought against somebody. Sometimes security cameras. But there were many incidents where there just wasn't enough evidence to determine exactly what happened. So people who had done things that they weren't supposed to do, they get to go free because there's no evidence against them. Then body cameras started to appear all over the country. That started around 2014. And as I mentioned, a lot of officers were skeptical. I was skeptical. The cops were afraid that these decisions that they have to make in a split second are going to get second guessed. They were worried that it was going to, that the cameras would interfere with their job, with their work. But little by little, the police departments began to realize something unexpected. The cameras not only protected the victims, but they also protected the cops. If the cops were being accused of excessive force, they could prove that they didn't use excessive force. Let's say the cops had written up in the report that this particular person had resisted arrest and he swore on a stack of Bibles he did not. Well, they've got the video evidence to prove that he did resist arrest. So it wasn't necessarily a bad thing for the police to have body cameras. Of course, like the cameras, they don't solve every problem, right? They don't show every angle. They just show one angle. They don't necessarily show what the police officer saw. For instance, the police officer might be facing this way, and that's what the camera sees. But he's actually looking that way or this way. So it doesn't necessarily mean that what you could see from the videos is what he saw. So that gets a little confusing. There's things that have to get worked out. But nevertheless, even though there's these limitations, they've been accepted across the country. And we expect to be able to see, the video from body cameras when there's some kind of an altercation, particularly like in these situations in Houston and Maine where, somebody was fatally shot. So we want to be able to see what exactly happened. And if it's good enough for the local police, why isn't it good enough for ICE? And what's this whole thing where you only get, if there's going to be a traffic stop, there's only going to be one officer that has a body camera working? What is that about? Why not all of them? That way you get to see all the angles. Maybe this particular ICE officer can't see. There's like 4 or 5 people on top of an individual. And he can't see anything because all these cops or all these ICE officers are on top of him. If each one of them had a camera on that was working, you'd be able to see a whole lot more. Why? I mean, they have the money. They have the money for everybody to have a camera, but not everybody has been issued a camera. That's interesting too, right? And something that most people don't know is that ICE already has a policy in place regarding body cameras. I mean, I just assumed that they didn't, that the policy was to not use body cameras. That's not true. There was, it's called ICE's Body Worn Camera Directive. That went into effect in February of 25, a year and a half ago. I'm going to just read a little bit of it just to tell you what it says. The directive mandates that officers activate BWCs, body-worn cameras, at the start of enforcement activities and deactivate them once the activity concludes. Officers who do not activate their BWCs must provide a written explanation. However, there are some exceptions. For instance, you're not allowed to film inside a healthcare facility, like a hospital. You're not allowed to film in a courtroom. You're not allowed to film people who are participating in activities that are protected by the Constitution. Like, let's say there's a protest, and there's all these people with signs saying, abolish ICE, abolish ICE. Well, they're not allowed to film those people to try and intimidate them. So there are some exceptions. The directive also details the procedures for managing and storing the BWC recordings, as well as reviewing footage in incidents involving serious bodily injury or death in custody. So, this directive, this policy has set out some important goals. They want transparency. They want the public to trust them. So they want more accountability. They want to preserve evidence. So they have some goals in place. But just because they have this policy out doesn't mean that ICE officers are actually using body cameras. They're not. Many of them are not. And frankly, that's one of the reasons that these fatal shootings have caused such an uproar. Because why wasn't there video evidence? Where is the body camera evidence? And if there isn't any, why isn't there? So it's causing a big ruckus. By the way, PSA, if you like what you're seeing, if you're getting some value out of this, please hit subscribe, hit like. It helps to push this out to other people. Right now I have about 150 subscribers. In fact, I think I only have 149. And I'm trying to get up to 200, 250. I'm trying to gain members and subscribers. I'm trying to gain subscribers, so I'd appreciate it if you would hit subscribe. I am going to have, I don't know if I mentioned this to you earlier, but originally this video was supposed to be about body cameras, about the fact that the vehicles are not identified in any way as being ICE vehicles, and it was also supposed to be about what Congress is doing. Like Cory Booker he proposed legislation back in the beginning of 2026, and other representatives and senators are calling for more accountability. They're trying to get some kind of legislation. Because even though DHS is in charge of what ICE can do, Congress is in charge of how much money ICE gets. They have some oversight of ICE, or they're supposed to have some oversight. And so they can certainly make laws that ICE is going to have to abide by. None of those things, all of that legislation, those bills are still just in committee, so there's nothing even up for a vote yet. But I decided that I would, because this particular video was getting longer and longer, I thought, you know what, let's just do one about body cameras, one about the vehicles, and the vehicles is also going to contain information about what's with the masks. What's with this mask bullshit? That, you think about it, if you get a car behind some black SUV behind you, and all of a sudden 4 guys come out and they're all covered in masks, what are you thinking? I'm thinking I'm about to get robbed. You know, they're going to pull me out of the car. They're going to hit me over the head. They're going to steal my car. That's what I'm thinking. I'm trying to get away from these people as fast as possible. That causes a problem because now ICE is like, well, we have to follow them. We have to catch them. And now they feel like they can shoot at people who are trying to get away, which is also not allowed. But anyway, that's for a second video. And then the third video will be about Congress. So subscribe so you don't miss those videos that are coming up. I'm hoping to have them out by the end of the week. And today is Monday. I had done the first part, I think part 1 and part 2 of this video yesterday. Then I had some camera problems, so I'm back up doing it again. So I hope to have this one out Monday, and I hope to have the vehicle one out by Wednesday and the Congress one out by Friday. So hit subscribe so you don't miss them if you're interested in these things. You know, in fact, another video I should do is about the whole temporary pause on traffic stops. Did you hear about that? You probably did. You know, ICE came out and they said they're going to put a temporary pause on the traffic stops because obviously you got 2 guys dead in a matter of a week, and you've got a third one down in Florida, St. Augustine, this guy was Mexican here legally on a visitor's visa. He was here vacationing. He was in a car, and ICE tried to stop them, and like 4 or 5 guys jump out of this car. I don't know what legal status they were in. They might have been illegally here, or who knows, the guys might have been smoking pot or something in the car. Who knows what? But they all jump out of the car, and this one guy ends up getting killed because he runs into traffic and gets hit by a truck. So I think it was a tractor trailer he got hit by. So that's another one. That's a third one down in Florida. So they decided to put this temporary pause on traffic stops, and within 24 hours, Trump has removed the temporary pause, saying that it's not necessary, that it wasn't necessary. And then Homan, who was on CNN yesterday, I think I mentioned that he was on Dana Bash's show Sunday morning, and she asked him about this. You know, what could possibly have been changed in less than 24 hours? And he says, oh, well, there's been changes. And she says, well, like what? And he says, well, you know, for instance, we've decided that every time there's a traffic stop, there's going to be one ICE officer who has a body camera on that's running, that's activated. Which to me makes absolutely no sense. Because look, you know, somebody who's got a body camera on who knows that he's the designated videographer for the day, he's supposed to be getting evidence of whatever the heck is going on with the officers and whoever the future victim is. But as we all know, you know, the cops like to protect each other. They'll lie in court for each other. They'll falsify evidence. They'll make false reports to cover each other's butts. And if this particular person who's got the camera on him, who's supposed to be taking all this video of what's going on, if he sees that somebody is doing something that they shouldn't be doing, like they've put a knee on his neck or something, he could just easily turn away and just, you know, oops, he got looking at the squirrel over there. You know, it's just, he could easily sabotage this, which is precisely why it shouldn't just be one person. They should all be wearing body cameras. The cops all do it. What's wrong with ICE? Why can't they do it? And we're not talking just about ICE. How about the U.S. Marshals? How about the DEA? Any kind of law enforcement, This is technology that is available, easy to use, and it should be de rigueur that they have to use the body cameras. There's no excuse for them not using body cameras, except that they want to keep shit private. They don't want people to know. Well, it is 11:23, and that is now the fourth phone call I have gotten today. So anyway, Homan had said there were a lot of things under review, the traffic stops being one of them. And I wrote all these down too. The traffic stop was one of them. The vetting process, that became a big thing with the guy who shot Johann Sebastian Duran Guerrero up in Maine. Because this guy, let me give you his name. Hold on a sec. Well, that's the wife's name. Hold on. This officer, David Brulette, this genius, he had contacted both of his ex-wives and told both of them that he was the ICE officer who had shot this kid. He was only like 26. And he asked at least the second wife, and probably the first, which is why he was calling her, to not talk about any kind of abuse that had gone on in the family, when they were married. And the second wife, who was Lucinda Brulette, she said, I'm not lying for you. I'm not going to lie for you. Now, ICE hasn't identified who the shooter was in this, but we already know because, like I said, the two wives have already identified him, have already talked about all the abuse that was going on in the family. He supposedly went into protective custody just a few days after the shooting. And that's from court documents obtained by Maine's Total Coverage. So all of this investigation about the vetting is coming at the same time that ICE has been doing this aggressive hiring campaign to try and get new officers. That was launched last year. They wanted to recruit 10,000 new ICE officers. And they also, part of the reason for that was because they wanted to be able to arrest 2,000 alleged undocumented immigrants every single day. And as we know, that's not been working very well. So much for getting the worst of the worst out of here. They just want their quota. We'll take the guy who looks like he looks like maybe he could be guilty. He looks like maybe he could be undocumented. I did something in another video where I talked about Elaine. I think her last name is Miles, but don't hold me to that. I know it's Elaine something. She's a Native American. She's a Native American actress. She was in Northern Exposure. She played the doctor's secretary, and she was in Smoke Signals. And anyway, she got detained again. Black SUV, no identification. And these 4 different agents get out, and they ask her for identification. So she brings out her card, her tribal card. She's a member of a tribe out of Oregon. And she's used this card for years to be able to travel between the United States and Canada, the United States and Mexico. And the one ICE officer says, well, that's a fake. And the other one said, yeah, anybody can make one of them. And they actually detained this woman. She is a Native American. Is that priceless? Come on. If anybody should not be getting arrested, it's a Native American. A lot of similarities. A lot of Native Americans share a lot of similarities. I remember I had a really good friend up in Seattle. I lived there for a year when I was young. And this guy, he was like a civil rights guy. He was very helpful. He was a Latino. He was a Chicano. And somebody had said something to him about, boy, you really look Indian. You know, you look real Indian, because he's pretty tall, and he's, you know, dark skinned, and he's got the long hair, and he looks Indian. He says, yeah, well, one time I was down in Colorado, and I had gone to an international. He had gone to an international meeting of, you know, Latinos and natives and all that stuff. And he says this one guy had come up to him and asked him, what tribe are you from? Right? So even the Native Americans think that the Chicanos might be Indians, and the Chicanos think that the Native Americans might be Chicano. So they do share a lot of facial similarities, but nevertheless, you know, there's plenty of stories, I've heard tons of them, about U.S. citizens being detained, and if they're carrying around their birth certificate, you know, if you're in, maybe you're Chicano descent, or you look like you're Latino, or you're Latino but you were born in the United States, and they're carrying around their birth certificates with them, you know, the certified birth certificate, maybe with a seal, depending on what state you're from. And across the board, the ICE officers are saying, that's a fake, that's a fake, that's a fake. So there needs to be review, according to Homan, this is happening, of the vetting for these guys, because like this guy, David Brulette, he's had all these accusations of abuse. There has to be some kind of review of the training, particularly what documents are acceptable and what ones aren't. They assure us that everything's under review. We've got it all under control. That's what he was saying yesterday. We're reviewing all kinds of things. Yeah, okay. So as far as the cameras go, you know, people like me who think everybody should be wearing them, that's because of accountability, transparency. It's to protect the officers against certain accusations, so that there's better evidence to present in a court. But how about the other side? How about the side that says, no, they shouldn't have to wear cameras? First of all, most people do think that cameras are a good thing, but they don't necessarily like the fact that they're mandatory. I don't know why. If it's a good thing, why wouldn't it be mandatory? You know, the opposing side talks about all the limitations to cameras and to video evidence, which I've already mentioned. I forgot to mention, audio can be bad, lighting can be bad. So besides the fact that the camera doesn't necessarily show you what the officer saw, there's also the fact that the lighting might be bad, the audio might be bad, they might not work. You know, you turn it on and it's not working. So there are limitations to it, but as I mentioned, you know, a lot of the people who are against these, they complain about the whole mandatory part of it. And you know, should there be exceptions? Probably. Like if somebody is doing an undercover operation, should they be exempt? And again, what are we talking about? Are we talking about ERO? Or are we talking about HSI? The Homeland Security Investigations Department, they would be doing the undercover stuff, wouldn't they? I don't think HSI should have to wear body cameras, but ERO should. Absolutely. And what about emergency situations where activating a camera isn't immediately possible? Obviously, this is stuff that the lawmakers in Congress are going to have to hash out, try to resolve, and try to come up with something eventually that works for both sides. So if you have an opinion on this, whether you agree with me or you don't, I think it's really important to get involved and contact your congressman or your senator and let them know how you feel about this. They do care about what the constituents feel. You know, I happen to live in a very purple district, and my representative is always sitting on the fence. And who knows, you know, I'm in Pennsylvania, who knows what the hell John Fetterman's going to do. I went up and looked on his website to see, what's his position on immigration. I found zero. Doesn't mean that it's not there, but I found zero. So yesterday I had emailed both Senator McCormick and Fetterman and my representative, Brian Fitzpatrick. And I'll be curious to see if they write back to me. I think when I do that last video regarding how Congress is reacting to things, the different legislative bills that are in committee right now, I'll let you know. Did they write back to me? What did Fetterman have to say? Or it's not going to be him, but what did his people say? Here's how you could do it. If you want to contact your person, and you know what? I wouldn't be so sure. A lot of times people say, well, I'm in a really red state, there's nothing you can do. Or I'm in a super blue state and there's nothing I could do because I disagree with all of this. You never know. Your voice is important. And just because your neighbors might be on the other side of this with you, they might not be contacting their congressman. So you should be the one that does. First of all, you have to figure out who your congressperson is. And there is a website, which is www, I know you don't have to say that anymore, .congress.gov, gov, /members/find your member. I will put that in the description and I'll pin it up on the top of the comments. And that gives you their name, their address in DC, their phone number in DC, and then it gives a little link that says contact. It's like lit up blue hyperlink. And you go into that and you can send them an email. And please be polite when you're doing this. It doesn't help to be screaming and yelling and have a lot of angry rhetoric going on. Just be polite and say, look, this is how I feel about it. And thank them for their time. That person will probably not contact you, but somebody in their office should. I'll be really surprised if I don't get any kind of a response, even if it's just an automated thank you very much for your comment, we'll be responding shortly or something. There should be some kind of something. There should be some sort of email back to anyone who writes to them, but I'll let you know. I didn't check it yet. It's about 11:30 on Monday. So they would have just gotten it early this morning. So I'll give them a couple of days to see if they respond to me. You don't have to be an expert on it. You don't have to be a lawyer. They want to represent you, so they want to hear from you. So I would absolutely ask you to contact whatever side you're on, contact your senators and your federal representative. The state senators and the state representatives have nothing to do with this, okay? At least not at this level. We're talking about federal senators and the federal congresspeople. So here on this channel, I'm going to continue to monitor these developments. I'll let you know as things move. Maybe something gets out of committee. That would be great. I hear a lot of rumors about stuff. Suddenly I heard, was it Saturday or Sunday, I heard somebody on NPR talking about how they're trying to get comprehensive immigration reform through. It's a freaking joke. They've been trying to do this for 20 years. And I'd rather just see one little thing fixed, because trying to fix the whole, when they say comprehensive immigration review, they mean fix the whole thing. They can't even fix one little part of it. So at least get these body cameras going. That should be a no-brainer, in my opinion. What do you think? Leave your comments. And by the way, if you do contact your senator or your representative and they respond to you, let me know. I'd be very curious to see across the country which senators are interested and actually respond to the constituents, and which ones, I wrote to Senator so-and-so in, Iowa, and he never bothered to even write me back. I would be very curious to see if you have any contact with these people, if they respond back to you. You can also pick up the phone. I know, millennials. I know, Gen Z. This is shocking, but you can pick up the phone and call because because you can pick up the phone and call, and they do have the phone numbers in D.C. But you can certainly Google whoever your senator is. And for instance, I don't know if it was McCormick or if it was Fetterman. They had a whole map of Pennsylvania. He's got an office in Philly. He's got an office in Harrisburg. He's got an office in Pittsburgh. He's got an office in Erie. And he's got an office in State College, where Penn State is. So if you don't want the long distance, oh, they don't have long distance charges anymore, do they? If you don't want to call all the way to DC, find your local office. And by the way, they're going to be on vacation in August. Feel free to go meet with them. See if you can go talk to your congressperson or your senator and say, look, this is very important to me. In fact, I think I'm going to do that. That's wonderful advice, Beverly. I think I'm going to do that. Because I don't remember exactly. I'll put it on the video because I'm going to look it up. When does their August break begin? They'll be on vacation from when until when? I'm going to see if I can get a hold of Fetterman. I'd love to see what, because McCormick, who the hell knows? He's a Republican. See, I shouldn't talk like that. I just told you not to do that. But, Fetterman, who the hell knows? He's supposedly a Democrat. I don't know what the hell. He had a lot of stuff on his page about Iran and Israel. Oh, and trying to get marijuana legalized across the country federally. So, great. Just keep puffing away. And don't worry or think about the important things like people getting shot and killed by ICE officers. Okay, and on that happy note, I'm going to let you go. Please hit subscribe. If you like this, hit like. But if you want to get additional videos from me when they come out, please hit subscribe. I'm trying to boost up my numbers a little bit, and I would really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.